Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be in the world. Welcome to the Sensitive Stability BPD live show. For those of you who don't know me, I'm your host. My name is Kevin Reynolds. I'm a BPD survivor and a BPD coach. We go live here on TikTok Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. US EST, where we talk about a different topic related to borderline personality disorder. This morning's topic is the why lie. And if you've never heard anybody say why lie before, I'll break that down so it's a little easier to comprehend. Because I'll be honest with you, the first part of this process, in terms of breaking it down, is simply understanding what it is, because we often hide from it. The why lie is a lie that you tell yourself as to why you don't have to improve, why you don't have to do something, why you can avoid certain topics or exploring certain ideas. Now, when I say it's hard to detect, thank you, Pasha. Good morning to you guys. What I mean by that is it's not like you're telling yourself this lie willingly. Does that make sense? So there's no part of you that's saying, I am willingly going to lie to myself to keep myself comfortable, to keep myself safe, to keep myself from improving or having to go through some of these motions that might get me better. The why lie comes in so many forms, so many fashions, it can be very difficult to even see that it is happening. Thank you, Kim. I look back at my life before remission, and there were a string of why lies. Let's go at it from a surface level uh, example that most people can relate to. Let's say that um, you are going to some event that you really don't want to go to, right? You really don't want to go to this event. It's coming up. It's really stressing you out. There's a lot of anxiety. Maybe you don't want to see a certain person or you don't want to have to deal with a certain thing. And then let's say that your tire goes flat, right? Now, this event isn't until 8 p.m., but your tire goes flat while you're running errands at 10 a.m. Now, we all know that we could go get the tire fixed and finish this one errand and then still make it home and make it to this event. But because the tire went flat, we can give ourselves this out, this why lie to escape reality and not have to go and do what we were going to do or supposed to do or committed to. Thank you, Jem. That's why it's called a why lie. The reason that I am lying to myself, though, is because I am scared of the event, right? But I have found a reason. Oh, well, you don't understand. That took an extra hour and a half out of my day when my tire went flat. I mean, we're avoiding the fact that we have a plethora of hours before this event. Well, it just threw me off kilter. Thanks, Jem. It just put me in a bad mood, and you wouldn't want me to go there and be in a bad mood, would you? I mean, there's all these justifiable lies as to why I don't have to go to the event that I know that I should be going to. Thanks, Fred. And it's difficult to break down the why lie because it's often surrounding something intentional. It's unintentionally doing it, but the purpose of the why lie is to keep you safe. So in order to break down the why lie, you might actually have to break down why you're scared. You might actually have to break down the fear. You might actually have to change something for real, right? Appreciate you, man. Thank you, Red. And I'll tell you, 9 times out of 10, it is easier to stay in the same place. It's easier to stay with what you know. You've become comfortable with that. And if that process is working for you, then why change it, right? Thank you, Sherry. And the answer is the long-term gratification. But people only do things that benefit them. If you are constructing your reality in order to keep yourself safe, right? That's benefiting you. You don't have to focus on these tougher topics. You don't have to focus on these bigger ideas. Thanks, Tara. And instead, you get to stay in the same spot. Appreciate it, Jem. And that same spot is um a partly curated by the people who are around you So when I didn't want to amount to anything, let's say I was scared of success, okay? Because that was a thing for me for a while, and many of us get scared of success because if you were doing it right, you'd actually have to take care of yourself. You know what I mean? You'd actually have to be a responsible adult. I was really scared of success, so at certain points in my life, I would surround myself with people who would promote the opposite behavior of success, right? I'd hang out with a bad crowd, do bad things, and then I identified as a bad person. You follow me here? Now, it doesn't have to be a bad crowd. You could associate with enablers. That's something that happens. Well, this partner, this person, this support group member, whoever that may be, a friend, a parent, whoever it is, they think that, this is right for me, right? And they're on board and okay with it's not my fault or I'm not to blame or I'm the victim or it's okay if you stay home when you should be going to work, for example, right? I would curate that world. I would pick people that I could kind of I mean, I hate to use the word manipulate here because I know a lot of people have a problem with that word, but I would manipulate them subconsciously or consciously, most of the time subconsciously, not even knowing I'm doing it, into believing that I am somebody who is incapable of doing things the right way. Do you follow me here? I went as far to, and this sounds terrible, but some of you may relate, so I'm going to go ahead and say it. Sometimes I'd fake illnesses, I'd fake sicknesses, for instance, in order to help curate my partner or the world around me into thinking that I'm incapable of doing the right stuff. Now, who in their right mind is gonna tell me to buckle down and try harder and go to work when I'm complaining about, let's say, heart failure? Now, this is problematic because you don't know if it's real or not. You see, I used to do this a lot of my life before remission. Sometimes I'd know what's happening. Other times I'm convinced my brain created these illnesses. But in remission, I've actually had real heart issues. How do you know the difference between the two? When you're like my wife, let's say, you're going to respond and care the same way. And we know that as BPD people, right? And people in general. Thanks, Michelle. We create these narratives and then we stick with them typically. And it becomes how we live. It becomes how we think. It becomes how we operate. It controls our decision making. It controls our interactions with other people. Thanks, Nicole. It controls how we feel about ourselves. You eventually start believing that you are somebody who's incapable of doing X, Y, and Z because of the Y lies that you've told yourself in A, B, and C. Are you lying to yourself? I mean, are you? You could start at the base of this building or this theory and ask yourself, do you believe that you can get better? If the answer is no, then you're lying to yourself. Right? Let me just tell you that right there. Because I believe that everyone with this condition can get better. I have yet to see someone who I think truly couldn't improve. How long it will take, where their awareness level is, what their hurdles are, the difficulties they might face, all these things matter. All these things change and it impact the journey. See what I mean? But ultimately, where are you limiting yourself? Thank you, Red. If you go through the history of your life, that's a pretty good place to start. Thanks. Thanks, Ellie. And you look at times that were uncomfortable, look at your decision making, ask yourself why you made those decisions because you thought they were the right decisions at the time, right? This is an easy way for you to start uncovering your lies. If it didn't turn out well, right? And you're going through the process of trying to identify the decisions that made it not go out, not go down very well. And you ask yourself why you authentically thought this was the right move, you'll have an answer. That answer might not be something you like or that you want to hear. Okay, but you will have answers. And those answers are usually the things that we're afraid of, the things that we lied to ourselves about in order to justify the action or behavior that's in front of us. I cannot underestimate at all the extent of which we will go to remain comfortable. I can't underestimate that. I um I would do anything to remain comfortable before remission. I could not tolerate the idea of, people having different opinions. I couldn't tolerate the idea that I was responsible for where I was in my life. I couldn't identify my accountability. And the why lie is exactly why that happened. In my head, I didn't even have to identify my accountability because I was always the victim. And if poor Kevin can't get better and it's the outside world that's attacking him all the time, where's the incentive to change, right? And the more people that buy into that ideology that are around you, the longer you stay stuck. Unfortunately, half of that's out of your control because you can't control them. You can control who you hang out with, but if you're in such a deep, dark place, thanks, Michelle, where you feel like you genuinely can't help yourself, you'll surround yourself with people who will reinforce that ideology, and then you will remain trapped. And you won't even see that you need to remove these people, but it all starts internally, like anything else. That said, I will turn it over to the questions that pretty much rounds off today's lesson. There's one way up here that I happen to see. Let me see if I can track it down. Almost up there. Somebody asked if I was married. Yes, I am married, happily married, going very well. This is my second marriage, my first one. Well, I married my high school sweetheart straight out of high school, convinced that I would never find anyone else, you know what I mean? And then we struggled for about a decade forcing the relationship and trying to get it to work. Um, again, because I was scared of being alone, mostly, and I think she developed into a codependent kind of situation. Somebody said 9 days clean and sober on Suboxone for now. Good for you. Congratulations. The substances is a very common delineation of how this manifests, the coping. Um, a lot of people think that the substances are problems. I'll remind you that they are actually the inappropriate solution. They are not the real problem. If you fix your life, then you won't feel like you need to rely on that kind of stuff. So, I applaud anybody who finds their way out of it. Hell yeah, man. I suffered from the worst substance dependency I've ever seen, going from one thing to the next to the next, addicted to every single thing you could possibly be addicted to. It's tough, very tough. But once you build a life that's satisfying, turns out you're not attracted to these things anymore. Pasha says, congrats. Yes, indeed. Congrats. I'm a psych nurse for many years, also quiet BPD. You're going to do great. I agree. This is the place to be. I'll tell you what, it is the place to be. Somebody mentioned weaponized incompetence. you know, there's a lot of things that get weaponized in the process of trying to combat BPD and getting better, a whole lot of stuff. And it is not easy to walk yourself through what is and what isn't being weaponized, and where you're reasonable and where you're not, where you're being objective and where you might have a personal bias that isn't going to serve you very well. But my hat's off to you if you could sit with an opinion that isn't yours and not react in a negative way. Joey says, is jealousy or retroactive jealousy common? Extremely common. Extremely common. I wouldn't even let my wife talk about like her past, right? If she mentioned a guy at all, whether he was from the past or in the present or fictional, it was enough. It was enough to send me into a massive spiral. And that comes from the insecurities, which are formed from the lack of self that comes with BPD. That's where the fear of abandonment kind of brews and boils. So from there, all types of symptoms manifest because fear of abandonment bumps into impulsivities and mood swings and unstable relationships and self sabotage. They all bounce off of each other, right? I want you to check out the resource center, Joey. There's a whole bunch of free stuff, some programs that I made for BPD kind of programs. You can get to it from the link tree in my profile here on TikTok, or you can go to sensitivestability.com and click the menu and go to the resource center. You're going to find some stuff like a symptom map generator, which will kind of help you understand how these things are bouncing off of each other. Hell says, "Oh yeah, I even get jealous of other people that I think are doing better than me." Yeah, they say the measure of a good friend. This might help you to hear Hells because when I heard this, it changed my perspective on that because I used to be really jealous of anyone doing better than me, right? The measure of a true friend isn't someone who will be there for you in dark times. It is somebody who will celebrate your wins with you. So I want my friends to do well. That's the truth. I might be upset that I'm not doing as well at certain times, but that's something we can work on. And surrounding yourself with people that do well, that's the hallmark trait of a winner, right? So I would argue that this is a great person to be around, whoever may be doing better than you. And I think that having gratitude for that relationship would go very far. Welcome, Dorte. Hopefully I said that right. Dorte. I don't know. I'm not even sure what flag that is, but maybe you can enlighten me. Hopefully, I'll catch up in the comments enough to see it. It can be very overwhelming living with this, no doubt about it. This is definitely the place to be, though, if you're trying to learn some of this stuff. Party Girl says, my therapist told me I can't talk about trauma in therapy. Is that normal with DBT? Well, um, I will say people with BPD, myself included, before remission, we hear something else. It's like somebody might say to us, because I have a hard time believing that that therapist would stand by that statement. Maybe it was misheard, maybe it was misinterpreted or something, or maybe they said it literally, but it was, meant in different context or whatever. Somebody'd say to me, "You look nice today, Kevin," and my BPD brain, the filter would kind of morph that into, well, why would they say that today? Do I not look good every day? Like, what are they trying to say, right? Uh, talking about trauma is a part of life, I would say, not just a part of therapy. Um, there's a lot of things going on in that statement in my head. Uh, and my first thought, if I'm being completely authentic, I'm not trying to call you out or anything, because I did these kinds of things. When you say that, it's almost as if you give yourself an out to not have to do therapy with that therapist because they didn't do something right, right? Now, I'm going to go out here on the other side of the limb and say that I had those kinds of experiences and I saw that kind of thing happen where I wasn't getting very much out of this relationship or that relationship. And that was a very real thing. A lot of the mental health professionals don't fully understand this. They don't have the awareness because they don't experience it. You know what I mean? So it's very hard for them to give the right type of advice that might actually work and solve your problem. Uh, that said, it's you should be able to talk about therapy, sure, but the program that I run, the BPD remission program, thank you, Deja. Good to see you this morning. I do most of the talking in the sessions. For those of you who have worked with me, who are past clients or whatnot, you will know that when we get into a session, I'm running my mouth most of the time, trying to give you what's up here, right? There are times when we have to talk about things, but a lot of that happens day to day in the 24/7 tech support. And there are times when we have to go through trauma, and we do have to talk about that, but it comes up at different points for different people, and some people end up not needing it, not care. You know what I mean? But you're on the right path, party girl. I appreciate that. I didn't mean to spend too much time on that one question, but I did think it was worth it to kind of explore that a little more. I think party girl needed that, and other people needed that too. I see you said no. She said that I have to complete DVT before any trauma work. Well, that sounds like her routine, her way of doing it. Ru- I have a different opinion than that. I don't like cookie cutter programs for that kind of reason. For some people with me, trauma is the first thing we're talking about. For some people with me, it never gets talked about because they just find a way to get over it naturally through learning the perspective changes I'm teaching, right? Others, they talk about it at the end. You just have to kind of like roll with the punches in order to like help somebody grow through something. It's the only way. Thanks for listing all these resources for us. Mr. Red does a great job of trying to give everybody all these different things that we've made and released and whatnot. Indeed, we have a book out. I just submitted the next book, which is it's in review right now. It is designed for relationships. So for anybody who's in a relationship and BPD's involved, whether you're the BPD person or the partner, that should be live soon. Let's see. Veronica says, "How do you form a sense of self?" I don't even know what that means. Good question. So self is broken into three categories. The first being identity. That is, who are you? Most of the time, when you have a condition like this, you don't completely know who you are. Thank you, Bon Bon. But that doesn't mean that you aren't somebody, just that we're not sure who that somebody is just yet, which is why we attach to groups and people and use that to fill the missing pieces of the pie. The second sense of self is self image, which is how you feel about yourself. Oftentimes, you may notice that we feel kind of crappy about ourselves, a lot of negative self talk, a lot of, um, you know, really talking yourself down into a bad place. And that reflects in how you live your life. Somebody who they say you could judge um someone's like depression or how they feel about themselves or their life in general by looking at how they take care of their car or their room. Is it messy? Is it clean? Did they take care of it? Is it spotless? And that is somewhat true. If I look back at my life, the times when I was critically depressed, my car was a wreck. My, home was a wreck. I wouldn't take care of myself very well, right? So these things are true. The third form of sense of self, is self-validation, which means the basic human right of feeling good enough. So without needing other people to tell you it, just knowing that you have value in general, and that would be that. How you compose and compile a sense of self involves filling those three buckets correctly. And it's not exactly easy, but it's doable for anybody. I'll tell you that. Alina says, "Every time I argue with my boyfriend, the stress makes me hallucinate and hear things. Any tips?" The stress of a situation, when emotions are high, it does change your perspective. It does change your experience. It does change things in the brain. And it is possible to experience these types of things under distress. My authentic approach for that, thanks, Dorte. My authentic opinion for that is, first, I would want you to rule out something else. Like there are cluster A um disorders like schizophrenia, for example, of which can actually be treated with medicine effectively. Okay. And there's hallucinations and stuff of that nature, and it does happen in stress and all that. So I would encourage you to talk to a doctor about the hallucination side of it, to rule out something like that could be treated with medicine. But in general, not letting things get to the point where your partner has such a strong hold over how you feel about yourself involves building yourself up, like we were just talking about. It also involves looking at the triggers in their deepest root form. So I'm not talking about your partner was late to the party and that upsets you because you look like a fool. I'm talking about feeling embarrassed, feeling disrespected, feeling unappreciated. The common themes in your life that have become patterns that create this type of distress and these types of dissatisfying experiences. Billy Boy says, "I'm 53, just been diagnosed with presumably BPD, with depression and anxiety and angina." So just checking. Billy, you're in the right place. All these different things that form alongside BPD, I often explain, are underneath the pyramid of BPD. You take off the top of the pyramid, the BPD part, the rest just kind of dissipate. And that's generally true. There are things like seasonal depression that still might happen. You will have depression throughout your life at certain periods of time. That's not actually a symptom. The mood swings are symptoms, right? But the degree and intensity of which we experience these comorbidities are exacerbated because of the BPD. And you get rid of the BPD, you're likely to have a pretty happy, pretty satisfying life for the most part. You're in the right place. I know it's when you get diagnosed, it feels almost like there's some relief for some of us, right? Thanks, Gasly. But there's also some fear. And that fear is I have to admit all this stuff, right? I have to come to terms with all these things. I have to all of a sudden be accountable. And unfortunately, you have to be accountable for a past that you can no longer control. You know what I mean? Like when I admitted this, I'm like, damn it. So that means like, yes, everything, all of it. And it doesn't mean it's your fault because you didn't choose this condition. It's not like you signed up for this. You know what I mean? But we're accountable for fixing it, right? We're accountable for improving it. And we're responsible for making those decisions of which would fix these things. Veronica says, how do you form a sense of self? I don't even know. All right, we're caught up on that. Sorry. Becky says, can you talk about paranormal and delusions, please? I think you might mean paranoia, right? Because I could talk about paranormal. Nobody'd be interested in that. Just kidding. Anyway, paranoia and delusions. So to keep us safe, the mind does all of these crazy things. That time you threw the plate against the wall, that was communication, right? The time that you scream at the top of your lungs, print off divorce papers, run out of the house, make these threats or insults, those are all coping mechanisms to keep you more comfortable than less. And you might say, well, how is that possible? Because these things are destroying my life. Well, the alternative is that you'd have to break down reality. You'd have to get through the delusions. You'd have to get through the paranoia. You'd have to actually sit and say to yourself, I feel very strongly that my partner's cheating, but is there really any credence to that? Let me sit down and break this down logically. And then if I decide that there's no actual real evidence that would fit in social norm, which means most people would agree, then I need to address why I feel this way to get over that paranoia, to get over that delusion, to get over that narrative that I have built for myself that keeps me comfortable. Thanks, Fiona. I think that may help. Kim says, my boyfriend had a problem with alcohol. He is in rehab right now. He is 6 months clean. Good for him. I too had a problem just like that. And I find the most effective solutions are building a life that you're actually happy living. I find that that is like the best way to stay away from all the negative coping mechanisms that were destroying my life. It's to have a life that I enjoy. Steph says I got diagnosed on Monday after being ignored for years. I am sorry to hear that. I that's resonates with me a great deal. I spent years trying to get this diagnosis, and many mental health professionals didn't see it, don't agree, don't understand, don't like to label. Um, I only got it in the end because I straight up asked for it, and I was already getting better. Like I tracked somebody down and forced them to give me the diagnosis. I'm like, this is what this is. I mean, when I say force, I mean I went in with the attitude of I'm not going to let this person tell me that labels. I don't worry about this. I wanted so desperately to get the diagnosis because I thought that that would help me. You know what I mean? Like I actually thought that would help me. I told her all the stuff I told her. She says, yeah, I agree. You have this. And then gives me the diagnosis. And it didn't end up helping me at all, really. That's my experience. Now I can see some circumstances when getting the diagnosis would be incredibly helpful. Somebody's in complete denial, and then a mental health professional is like, "Nah, you have this." Well, there we go. That's helpful, right? But chasing it was unproductive. I wasted years of trying to convince people to, agree that I have this. I felt validated. That's like a BPD trait right there. Like me trying to force them to agree with my opinion. I mean, I was right about it, undoubtedly so. But it was a waste of time that I could have spent focusing on just changing the behaviors that were destroying the relationships in my life and making things so terrible. You know what I mean? Oh man, I'm terrible with the comments. I'm doing it alone at the moment. So it's kind of hard to keep up. Sorry about that, guys. Star says I felt a split coming on and had a moment at work. I immediately left and cried for 3 hours in my car. So in retrospect, right, like going into the situation, looking back at it, that probably didn't help too much, right? Now, could you have prevented it? I don't think you could have, or else you would have, right? But what would we do to prevent that the next time? If you see what I mean, how can we ensure that this doesn't happen again? Because if that happened, I mean, it happened. Like, let's move on from it, but let's recognize the fact that we didn't have the tools in our toolkit in order to deal with that any other way. If you had, you would have done it the other ways, correct? So the question is why? Why did that bother you so much to where you had to escape that way? What part of that upset you to that degree, right? And I think that that's worth looking into. But there are answers to that. And if you're really honest, you don't have to tell other people what you're thinking in your mind. You know what I mean? That conversation is between you and you. So at least do yourself the courtesy of being completely truthful. Question yourself. This didn't turn out well. What did I do? And could that have been the problem? Is there something I could have changed about what I did that would have resulted in something else? Oh, I could have done this instead. Well, why didn't I do it? What was the reason I didn't do it? What am I scared of? And when you break that down, you might be actually likely to get it done next time. Mel says, honestly, that was me in high school. I knew I had it, but the diagnosis didn't feel good when I got it. Yeah, I mean, I was in denial for like the first couple of years. You know what I mean? Like I didn't want anything to do with this condition. I didn't want to believe that I had it. I didn't want to believe that I grew up in a household where mental illness wasn't a big thing. You know what I mean? Mental health wasn't something that you do. You're fine. You're like every other kid, and I think part of it is not wanting to be responsible as adults for some of the stuff that's happening. Well, it couldn't have been me that contributed to this, and that's why the kid's doing these things, right? But let's be real about it. The parents most certainly have something to do with how we end up. Not trying to upset you, parents. I'm really not, but your parents had something to do with how you turned out, and their parents had something to do with they turned out, and that's just how it is. It's not your fault because just like the BPD person and just like your parents before you, everybody's doing the best they can at the moment they're doing it. If you're making a decision, how's it benefiting you? Was it the wrong decision? Okay, but how's it benefiting you? Because people only do things that benefit them. You know what I'm saying? You quit that job impulsively. What was the payoff? Like, why? Was it that you didn't have to address the fact that you have a problem with tolerance or respecting other people's opinion, or that, you can't be an integral part of a team where you are responsible for something and held accountable for it? Usually by a boss, for example, a supervisor. What is your hang up with the truth? Fits right into our lesson plan this morning, the why lie, right? It's real tough living with this. It's hard to see it all. It really is. But my hat's off to you all for doing the right thing and making the effort. Kath says, what do I do when I'm mostly okay on my own, but I'm an absolute mess when I'm with my boyfriend? Well, when you're on your own, you're not relying on someone else to determine your emotional state because that someone else doesn't exist. When somebody pays you the right attention, you get into the right relationship. And I'm not saying love can't exist at the same time, by the way, or that you can't be in love. We start to rely on that person to fill the missing pieces of the pie, which is inappropriate because they cannot be responsible for that. But we will try and make them responsible for that. And this doesn't happen consciously. You didn't decide that this person's now responsible for how you feel, but that's basically what's happening, right? So very sadly, many of us end up isolating, retreating. We just say, well, relationships never work for me, so I'm just going to avoid them altogether, which is a terrible way to have to live, especially if you want a relationship, if you don't want to be alone. But my question would be, are there patterns? Look for the patterns and try to determine what it is that happens with your boyfriend that upsets you so much, that sets you off so much more than when you're by yourself. And what is it that we are running from in order to stay safe, in order to stay comfortable? Because that's a thing too, right? All right, let's try to find some more here. It's real awkward doing this when I have to do this by myself. I'm like scrolling through, and the messages snap back to the bottom, and then I miss stuff, and it's difficult for me to keep up. But I'm doing my best here. Thank you, Faye. Bear with me, guys. Ricky says, "How does a man with BPD act when he falls in love?" Thank you, Mysterios. Okay, so I think that question, the answer to that's going to be different depending upon all the men, whether they have BPD or not. Now, if you want to try to find paradigms that people with BPD suffer from, I wouldn't say that there's a big difference between the men and the women with BPD in terms of how it changes them when they are in love. In love's an interesting part of that question because we operate on infatuation, which doesn't mean that you can't also be in love. But when you say the question that way, what I think you're trying to say is how would a person act if they have BPD and they really like me and they really want to be with me or they're in love with me, right? What would be the warning signs of that? I don't even know if you're looking at it from the warning signs perspective, but the overinvestment into you, giving far too much that might even start making you feel uncomfortable eventually. It's usually okay in the honeymoon period. Everybody likes that. But 3 months into the relationship, he's still doing all these things for you and you're not able to keep up. And, he's building resentment and asking you, why you don't do the things he does for you, right? That's a very common one. Their mood being entirely reliant on how you interact with them. It becomes very hard to express anything negative to them. You might start walking on eggshells because they're hypersensitive to criticism, judgment, feeling disappointed. Like if you're disappointed in them, that will set them off. These things are all triggers, right? The triggers become hypersensitive in a relationship is what I'm saying. That's another reason why the other person said, why am I better when I'm alone than when I'm in a relationship? Well, it's because a lot of the triggers become emotionally inflamed when you're in a relationship, but you're not worried about impressing a partner that you don't have. You see what I mean? Unfortunately, it typically doesn't get rid of the pain of the condition, the base pain of it. When you're in a relationship, it gives you something to blame, to point a finger at for the pain, which makes it seem like a lot of the symptoms become exacerbated, and they very well may. But I would argue that the core components of BPD, they don't actually go away just because you're single. You see what I mean? Uh, but that's why the BPD individual changes as they get into a relationship, though, because, I found somebody who could fill the other half of me. Thanks, Miranda. I was literally going through my life trying to find the other half instead of trying to make myself whole and then offering my whole person. Thanks, Ricky, to a potential partner. I went the other way with it. I was like, how can I find a partner who could be responsible for me feeling good? Doesn't seem fair, does it? Kimberly says, dude saying a whole lot of nothing. Oh, damn, man. I'm so sorry about that. This man doesn't have BPD. Get a real therapist, not him. Well, I'm glad that I can at least offer some type of entertainment for you. That's because I'm competing with the Kardashians right now. Apparently, as it comes to you, right? And you choose to watch this over the Kardashians. Pretty cool. Appreciate that. Dude dates one girl with BPD and goes on live to make a buck. I had BPD personally. And then studied it. I've worked with over 1,200 of us. I've taught classes on it. I have now written 2 books on it, working on the third. It was the center topic of my dissertation, my PhD program, my master's program. And I did over 4,000 hours of therapy trying to get the hell out of it. So that's where I'm coming from and why I do what I do now. But that said, you're here for a reason, it shows up on your For You page. So there must be some benefit somewhere for you. And TikTok must think that this is better than the Kardashians for you at the moment. So I'm glad you're here. Sammy says parents 100% set the bar. They are the first relationship we see. That they are highly influential, no doubt about it. And you do mirror as a human being. That is how you learn. We are social creatures, and a lot of the learning, thanks Mysterious, comes from watching the examples around you, which is why we have situations where some people struggle like socioculturally, right? Like you look at certain cultures are undoubtedly more likely to have these symptoms than these symptoms. You know what I mean? While the whole world is vulnerable to getting this condition, which was part of my dissertation, is proving that it can affect all demographics. They don't suffer in the same ways. I noticed that certain demographics suffer more from different things, and that's a cultural thing. And it starts with what you're watching with your parents and literal pop culture and, your environment and all that. Thank you, Michelle. Not my daughter's page says single 12 years. I'm terrified to get into a relationship at 52 because of my BPD diagnosis. Yes, that you're in a giant boat, my friend. Also just read the book. It was fantastic. Will travel with me now. Thank you. I appreciate that. If you liked it, do me a favor, leave a review because it matters. I mean, people read the reviews and that determines whether or not they're going to buy the book. Um, for those of you who don't know about the book, here it is: 21 Golden Rules for Conquering BPD. It's everything that I could get into. A condensed guide to try and I wanted to simplify this as much as possible. That was the point. You're probably going to like the next one, Not My Daughter's Page, because it is focused on relationships. It's currently in publishing review right now. So hopefully we'll have that out by the end of the week. All goes well. And it will be, it's basically the same size, slightly longer, but it's focused on relationship tips. And I think that would help prepare you very nicely for the next one. I know it's scary, but I'd argue that the scarier thing would just be being alone forever and not trying. I think that would be scarier. And I wouldn't wish that on you, because we want to share happiness. Happiness is best when it's shared. That's where the real good memories come, the best memories, the absolute best ones. They involve other people. That's because it's how it's meant to be. We're not meant to have to suffer alone. I often say the easiest cure for BPD would be to pick somebody up and put them on an island, sort of, right? Not really, but it would stop the outbursts because episodes require audiences. You know what I mean? Splitting requires an environment and people and things, right? Most of the time, not all the time, but a lot of it would be better. But it's not a realistic solution. The better solution is to figure out how to learn to tolerate other people, how to allow them to have an opinion that's different than yours. Daenerys says, I have BPD, bipolar, and PTSD. I struggle with concentration and communication. I split frequently. I get it. So bipolar can be treated with meds. So if that's many times it's a misdiagnosis, meaning people think it's bipolar because they don't know about BPD, the mental health professionals, and then you end up with bipolar and then the meds aren't working. But if the meds work for you on that, then that could be very useful, very helpful. So I would say, consult a doctor if you haven't already about that part of it. But the BPD, there is no medication for that. And if you resolve the BPD, I'm willing to bet you're going to have a hell of a better time with everything else. If not, see it all dissipate and disappear for you altogether. And that goes for the PTSD as well. All of this stuff bounces around into each other, right? Like it's the agoraphobia, this fear of not being in control. That's a direct result. The OCD, this obsessive compulsion that makes you want to, control everything. That's usually a result of the BPD. You know what I mean? The depression's usually a result of all this stuff that we experience with BPD. The anxiety is a result of, having to live a timid, stressful life. Thank you, Jem. Because of the BPD. Like it's the substance use disorders, a result of the BPD, the intermittent um explosive disorders, the anger disorders, all coming from this, right? You get your life straight and you get the BPD straight, which means getting that whole sense of self to where you're not feeling insecure because anger and all this stuff masks pain. So we got to get through all that stuff and understand it. And more importantly than even understanding the pain is understanding that you can get rewarded for doing things differently. That's the biggest concept to learn. Kate says, I know they diagnosed me with bipolar without asking me my symptoms after already getting diagnosed BPD. That's, it's just so frustrating. It's so frustrating. You know how in surgery they're doing robotics now. So, and they say, well, you'd much rather have this robot replace your heart than say a person because the robot has a 99.9% perfect rate, right? The person has like a not 99%, Uh, I think unfortunately the way things are going, eventually people will be just very simply diagnosed electronically. I think I think we're going to be shocked to find out how many people get misdiagnosed over like the last 100 years. You know what I mean? And how much more accurate the computer is. Do I like it? No. But do I like the idea that people will know? Yes. Do I think it will eliminate the innate need for us to want to pursue person to person help? No, at least not right now. Um, but I do think it would be helpful because I think a lot of people get misdiagnosed. It's very, very common. And most of the people that find me, by the way, who reach out and feel free to reach out. It's, my email button's super easy to do. If you don't know what to say, just say hi. The email button's right in the profile, or you can go use the contact form at the website, sensitivestability.com. Um, I'd like to give you some personal guidance, but a lot of the people that reach out to me, they've been diagnosed with like 5, 6, 7 things. And I was too. I was diagnosed with over a dozen things, but it turns out solving this one solved all my problems. Mel, good morning to you. Oh shit, we missed Mel. Can you repin that one, if you don't mind? Melanie says, I seriously need somebody to talk to. Well, please do reach out. Trying to find the one, because I do personally respond to all my emails, so I'd like to be able to do that for you. I got it. Mel says, did I get blocked by Kimberly? I don't even, oh man. All right. We got to get this comment pinning thing under control here. Honestly, like it doesn't matter if you get blocked by Kimberly. She probably got muted. We mute people if they start derailing other people's journey. If you're gonna come in here and just insult people, I mean, what do you expect, right? It's like a natural byproduct of the world. Mel says, I'm starting a new job today and I'm nervous about how I'll ruin relationships with coworkers already. Well, that's a trigger. The trigger is called fear, which the acronym I break down reads future events appearing real, meaning this hasn't happened yet, right? But we're paranoid because of the insecurities, not feeling good enough. And also the past historical record has probably contributed slightly to this. And then I'll say, Mel, a certain part of this is just normal. It's called imposter syndrome. Basically, everybody gets it. The first time I went live, I was like, oh man, I feel like an imposter here. I can't go live. I can't talk to people. You know what I mean? First time you start a job, it's like, I don't belong here. You can get a degree. My sister got an accounting degree like I did, a nice 4-year degree, got hired right out of college. I decided not to go that route still, right? Obviously. But and she's talking to me about it. I remember her telling me about it many years ago. She's like, I feel like a fraud. And I'm like, but you have a degree in it. She's like, yeah, but they do all these things. I'm just like, listen, everybody starts out like this in life. Like that's how it is. And people don't just expect you to be a perfect person either, right? So go in humble with the intention of making everyone's life, more pleasant for you being there. Maintain the right boundaries so that you don't overextend, so you don't get trapped in that people pleasing mentality of which can backfire and build a lot of um, resentment for yourself and other people. I think you'll do just fine. One thing I noticed, Mel, about us with BPD, we are insanely impressive people when we actually apply ourselves. We are incredibly impressive, great problem solvers, wonderful ambition and drive, great people to hang out with and talk to. Thank you, Red. Usually great charisma. We usually don't have a problem making friends if we actually talk to someone. I've always been an introvert my whole life, so I never really enjoyed talking to people before. Strangely, the only people I've ever really enjoyed talking to are people with BPD, like really enjoyed it where I'm like, oh, I want to talk to people. It's like, it's us. I like talking to us, but it's because I relate to us so much and I get it. Thanks, man. Thank you, Tara. See, Shattered Amethyst. Okay. I'm confident I got that right. Nice name. I don't notice when I'm going down a downward spiral until it's too late. So that tells us that you're carrying a hypersensitivity to certain triggers of which you are holding in what I call a residual emotional tank. So you have the daily tank, which is what you're talking about. You're saying, I'm in a spiral. Boom, it's too late, right? What I'm saying is there's another tank over here that you don't think about. And it's the reason why feeling disrespected bothers you so much to where it goes 0 to 100 like that in the daily tank. There's a reason why feeling unappreciated, overlooked, unheard, neglected, ignored, rejected bothers you so much more than a neurotypical person to the point where your daily tank spikes. Now, how much weight are you carrying in that residual tank? That's to be determined. How often do you explode? How often do you spiral, right? How often do you split? And are there themes? I think you should go to the resource center. You'll find a lot of free information there that I've released. It's a click away. Go into the profile, go to the link tree, and you'll see a link to the resource center. If you're on YouTube or Spotify, where we post these lives as well, go to sensitivestability.com, click the menu, go to the resource center. And I want you to look for the emotional tank draining tool. I programmed a tool specifically for this problem. Okay. Every time you start to feel slightly dysregulated, I want you to use the tool. It's going to help break down what's happening. If you can't use it in time, I want you to use it retrospectively. You can use it right now. Go back to the last time you spiraled in your mind. What did you feel? Follow the guidance of the tool and visualize what has happened. Okay. The idea is to get to see the patterns between the emotions, to be able to weigh the emotions, because you can't fix things without a proper roadmap. If I told you you have to extract all the gold out of a gold mine and it's located somewhere in this mountain and you don't even know where it is, that's a problem. Once you find it, you don't know how big it is. Once you know how big it is, what kind of rocks in there, right? Like what kind of problems are you going to have when you go to extract this gold mine? Do you have the right support, the right help? All these circumstances and conditions matter in order to achieve the task. Kim says, how to stop yourself from getting frustrated, freak out over someone saying you did something wrong. Firstly, is a perspective change, which is that they're allowed to have an opinion, and that opinion can be that I did something wrong. Does that even mean they're right? That doesn't matter yet. We just have to accept that they have an opinion. That's step one. Once you accept they have an opinion and you remove the emotional weight and you look at it like it's data, you can work with that. If they're truly wrong after you compare it objectively to social norm, you're not forced to do something about that. Maybe there's some credence to what they have to say, though. I like to collect all the data because it allows me to make better decisions. User says, I feel a buildup of anger that eventually explodes. How can I deflate before explosion? So similar to what I was saying about the emotional tank and understanding also that will help in the meantime, in the interim, instant, immediate situation. But we also have to understand what's in the residual tank. To better understand that, you would use the symptom map generator. That's also in the resource center. It puts your entire condition on one sheet of paper. We need to understand why we're getting angry. I don't just mean the surface level thing where so and so forgot to pick me up a shake when they got them one. It's like, I mean, what are the real problems? What are the real actual dilemmas that you're facing? And these are problems and patterns that you're probably having your whole life with many relationships. Might be exacerbated in one particular type of relationship, like the romantic relationship. But these problems, if you don't handle the real triggers, you'll always argue about them. You'll always be upset about them. They'll always bother you. It's the same when you have a conflict in a relationship. If you don't address the core value differences and try and compromise or try and learn to tolerate, you will continually, repeatedly end up arguing about the same thing. Think about your relationship. Do you guys fight about the same stuff all the time? It might look like it's different. This time I'm arguing about the dishes. That time I'm arguing about the bed. You didn't say you pick up the kid on time, blah, blah, blah. All you talk about is you. These things aren't the real problems. There's patterns underneath these problems. And you're responsible for your reactions. Not theirs. And it's very hard to make progress when two people are throwing this hot potato back and forth. At some point, somebody's got to be mature enough to drop it and just say, it's all right that this other person has a different opinion. It's okay. And to stop that explosion too, by the way, user, I did a video, I think it was Monday. So if you go back, it's one of the 4 videos on my page right now at the top of my TikTok page. And it specifically talks about how to get out of episodes. There's also a whole playlist for BPD episodes. There's a bunch of different playlists. Underneath the email button above the videos on my profile, if you scroll left and right, you'll find BPD episodes, and there's a plethora of information there. Ruby says, I'm not diagnosed nor self-diagnosed, but my psych said it's possible I have BPD. Any advice? Yes. My advice would be immediately start focusing on what behavioral changes that you can make to immediately benefit you, that will immediately reward you. The diagnosis is only so helpful. Like I said, there's no medication for BPD anyway. So, and I've seen people with all types of conditions. I have worked with people, all types of conditions, and seen them have the ability to improve without the medicine. So I'm not saying that you should stop your medicine, by the way, if you're on it, because that could be dangerous. Get off of it responsibly with your doctor so you don't end up having seizures if you're on medicine. And I'm not saying don't do something that's working. What I am trying to say, without getting burned at on the cross, so to say, like crucified here, is that I believe anything can be done holistically without the meds. I'm not particularly running around here like a holistic advocate or anything, but what I am saying is I'm not on any meds. I am the worst case I've ever seen. Unbelievably off the rails, man. And if I could do it, anybody can do it. We just have to figure out what excuses we're making in order not to do it. We have to figure out what fears we're avoiding in order not to do it. We have to learn how to accept some of these truths in order to achieve the outcome that you want, right? And I know. I mean, look, I know it's hard, and especially when you're starting to raise your awareness. Thank you, Tara. And you realize that BPD literally affects almost every aspect of your life. That's a hard thing to admit. It's a stage of awareness. It's daunting. It's overwhelming. But hey, we're not trying to fix everything overnight. That's not possible. That's not realistic. You'll end up feeling like a failure because you can't do that. So just make today slightly better than yesterday. Just tiny little bit better, a little bit. And it could be some small, simple thing. I made my bed today. Typically, I don't care enough about myself to want to be in a neat looking environment. So today I made my bed and I did the dishes. That's different. Do you see what I'm saying? For some people, it's grooming. For some people, it's simple things to take care of yourself. For others, it's letting your partner talk. I'm going to let them talk. I don't care how upset I am. I'm just going to listen to them talk and make sure I fully understand them. That will make your life better. I swear to God, it will. We could worry about the how do you relay your feelings part after we understand their feelings, because they'll never fully understand yours, but you could fully understand theirs. If you start adopting some of these perspective changes, your things are going to go way better for you. I guarantee it. That said, guys, we are at the end of our show today. I want to remind you that we go live here on TikTok Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. US EST, where we talk about a different topic related to BPD. As Tara says here, thanks for everything. Thank you all for everything, too. I appreciate everybody who contributes and helps, answer these questions. And it's very helpful, guys. It really is. If you've heard us talk and you know the answers, help out for sure. Have a nice day. I will see you all bright and early tomorrow, 7 a.m. US EST.